Hello, I'm Paul Race, and welcome to my workshop. I have a interesting review, sort of backhanded review of a banjo that I'm actually going to be getting ready to sell. But I thought before I moved it out of the building, I would show it to you and give you some idea of how they go together, how this particular kind goes together, and actually of its benefits and disadvantages. This is a Davison banjo. You can almost read it there. You'll notice that part of the word has actually gone away. For a photo shoot at one point, I put some black electrical tape across the top, and when I took the electrical tape off, the part of the name of the banjo came off. Davison banjos are actually made by Jameson Guitar Company, which at the time these were made were some of the lowest cost and lowest quality import banjos and guitars that you could possibly buy in this country. Since then, Savannah and Stag and several others have come along that have broken that in terms of coming up with even lower cost and lower quality. That said, I bought this banjo chiefly to be a travel guitar. I wanted to be able, it's a 6-string as you'll notice, and I wanted to be able to keep up with my finger picking when I was on vacation. So however it sounds to you, the left hand is like a guitar, the right hand of course is a The 6-string banjo is most notable probably in the early days of the Muppet movies. Kermit is playing banjo in the swamp, but actually the sound of the banjo you're hearing is a 6-string banjo. It's not ordinarily a 6-string banjo is not a fake guitar as some people seem to think it is, or a way for a guitar player to quote-unquote play banjo. You can't really do bluegrass on them very well, and some other kinds other kinds of music can't really be played on them very well. That said, the 6-string banjo was first invented in the 1890s and was used along with a 4-string banjo in early jazz. Some of the early jazz, or what we call ragtime bands, used 6-string banjos while other people were using the 4-string banjos. So it's a musical instrument in its own right. It gets a bad rap as a rule because of so many companies advertising it as a way a guitar player can learn to play banjo. You can't play this like a 5-string banjo. It can't be done. It doesn't have the right strings on it. I'm going to be putting the back on it shortly. When I bought this, again, I bought it so I could keep up with my my 6-string practice on vacation. I had a quote-unquote travel guitar from Martin, and the issue for me was it had a neck like a baseball bat and did not have any kind of sustain that made it fun to play. So this served the job. I didn't fly with it. I took it in the trunk of our car, but hardly took up any room in a good gig bag. It hardly took up any room at all. But I did take this off because I didn't feel the need to have a resonator on it, and for what I needed to use it for, and also the resonator caused the whole thing to take up a lot more space than it ordinarily would. I think I picked this up used. I don't remember where, perhaps a pawn shop. But when I did pick it up, it required quite a bit of adjustment. The nut, the strings just sat too high in the nut. I got an automotive feeler gauge, they call it, which has a lot of like tiny blades that you can put next to your fret and figure out exactly what the depth of your fret is. So I held that feeler gauge up against the nut and filed the slots just a little bit deeper so that the strings would sit lower. Otherwise they sat an eighth of an inch higher than they really ought to. The neck adjustment is on the back. It's one of those funny things. This actually does a number of things. It keeps the this is called a coordinating rod. On fancy banjos, they have two. On the old banjos, like 100-year-old banjos, they're made of wood. But what this does, it has two functions. One is it helps adjust the neck angle relative to the pot of the banjo, but also it keeps the banjo from not being round anymore. If you adjust it wrong way, it'll actually kind of squish the banjo up this way, which is not good. So I adjusted that. On top of that, it has a neck adjustment rod in the neck that allowed me to straighten the neck out. When I bought this, as I was said, not only was the action bad up here, but it was bad up here, down there, because it came completely out of adjustment. And that is so typical of Chinese banjos, that they come so far out of adjustment. Sometimes they're not even, sometimes this isn't even tight. Sometimes the neck isn't even tight to the pot. So I'm just saying, if you order a $100 or a $200 or even a $300 Chinese banjo, and it comes and it's unplayable, that's normal. That said, if you're like me and you've been tweaking instruments all your life, then it's not that big a deal. Or else you take it to your local banjo shop and have them set it up. The other thing about banjos that's unique, almost unique to banjos and certain other instruments, is that the bridge placement is variable. So you see where the bridge is now? When it comes, it could be up here, it could be down here, it might just be loose in the box or a little piece of plastic and you have to put it in yourself. But when you put the bridge on the banjo, there's a trick you can do with overtones to make sure you have the bridge placement right, because if the bridge is too close this way, the banjo will be out of tune one way. If the bridge is too far down this way, it'll be out of tune another way. And so there's a way in one of my articles, and I'll post a link, there's a way in one of my articles that shows how you can use the overtones. This is an overtone, oops, and this is the fretted note. Notice they're the same. You can use the overtones to figure out exactly the most precise placement for the bridge. So I would say, when I got this, not counting taking the resonator off, or as I like to call it, the fruit bowl, when I got this, I probably spent about two and a half hours just making it into a musical instrument. That said, from that point on, it's actually been very handy. I just have a better one now. But you can tell it has possibility, right? I used a similar 6-string banjo, actually one from Dean, that's built a slightly different way in a Dixieland production one time, and learned to play it like a Dixieland banjo. That's another story. So they have a lot of possibilities. This one, once it's set up, didn't suck too bad. Now what I am going to do before I get this ready to sell is I'm going to put the resonator back on. And the way this resonator goes on is it has these little clips that go around the various sides of the banjo, and they hold the screws that holds the resonator on, if you can see that. The resonator has 4 bolts, and once these are in their proper position, I can just screw those bolts right in through this little hole in the middle of the flange piece, and it'll be very secure. This is actually a common dodge on low-cost banjos. Now the lowest cost banjos won't have a wooden pot. A lot of them now are being made with ceramic or bakelite or other kinds of plastic pots. I do confess that I have never sunk to using a plastic banjo yet, and I don't plan to. This does have a wood pot. It has several plies, and actually, considering that I've abused it a little bit in terms of where I've taken it and what I've done with it, it actually has held up extremely well. When I got it, I did not like the caramel color. You see what I mean? Banjos tended to be darker brown, and I like the darker brown version of most banjos. Exception to that is the well, the gold tone banjos are kind of yellowish gold, and the good time banjos, a lot of them are natural, just natural maple looking wood. This was this caramel color. I wasn't thrilled with it, but of course with the resonator off, you don't really see it anyway, because the only thing that's left is the back and the side of the pot. So I will show you one other type of banjo that is would be considered a step up from this, and is very common. This is an old K banjo, and I mean very old. It's probably 40 years old or more. It was made at a time when the Gibson banjos had eagles stamped on the back, so they stamped an eagle on the back of this, so it would look would fool. I don't think it really ever fooled anybody into thinking it was a Gibson. But this is this happens to be a 5-string, but the difference between this one and that one is that instead of these little flange pieces holding the resonator on, the pot itself is made out of metal. Usually it's nickel-plated steel, nickel-plated brass, or in a couple cases it's aluminum. But if you see how the pot works, it is made so that the sound can come through the resonator up to the front, which increases the volume of the banjo. You see, when I'm holding a backless banjo up against my stomach, half the sound goes into my stomach. The resonator reflects it out front. But in this case, this one-piece cast metal flange and pot put together, not only does it substitute for these little flanges, but it also provides a little bit more volume. So if somebody's starting out and they want a bluegrass banjo that has maximum volume, this sort of banjo is not a bad idea. You'll notice that if I took the back off of this one, it would be a deadly instrument. It would have sharp edges, pointed edges everywhere. So you never, you can take a back off of one of these to adjust it, but you don't want to take it out of the house like that, or you'll wind up hurting somebody, maybe yourself. This is called a pop-top banjo because the pattern of these little indentations looks like the pop tops of old soda bottles. So it's called a pop-top banjo. Typically, if you have an instrument company that has a range of banjos, typically the cheapest banjo will be a backless banjo with perhaps a synthetic pot of some kind. The next one up, and for a lot of companies, they don't have those. They don't have that option. The next one up will be a banjo that is held together by these little flanges. And then the next one up will typically be the pop-top banjo. And then once you get beyond that, you get into banjos where the pot is actually made of wood, but then there's a flange similar to this that goes all the way around that holds a resonator on. It's called a resonator flange. If you see a banjo with a resonator flange, generally you're approaching the top of that banjo line. A lot of banjos over the years, there was a Japanese company called Aria that made all 3 kinds of these, and some of the top end banjos actually came out fairly well. So don't necessarily assume that if a banjo is Japanese or Chinese that it can't be played or can't be put in adjustment or can't be used. But I just wanted to show you, this is the second step up, or actually in some cases the first step up from the banjos that have the little flanges on them in most lines. So not saying that it's the world's best banjo. It has the pop-top banjos tend to have a tinier sound than a wood banjo with a real resonator flange on them. But at least they have the volume. And if you're wanting to learn bluegrass, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm going to put this back down. Now you may be wondering how I will get these on here. Well, the hard part will be putting them on a right place, the right parts. But the way it goes on is these little nuts that hold this is called a J hook, and on each J hook there's a thread at the bottom, and these little nuts tighten onto that thread, and that's how you tighten the head on the banjo, is by tightening these nuts all the way around. What I have to do is figure out which of these nuts to take off, and then when I put the little flange pieces back on, get them in the right position so that it lines up with the screws that I cleverly left in the resonator so I wouldn't lose them. I'll put this on momentarily and show you what I've got. I have used a standard screwdriver that takes a little bit as a rule. I have used that to loosen the little nut that's on the bottom of the J-hook as a rule. There are also little tiny lock washers there that I had forgotten because they don't put them on all the banjos. So I'm putting the lock washers back. There was a lock washer on the top and on the bottom of the little flange piece. So I'm putting the ones back there. Then I screw the little nut back on there. So you got your J-hook. You notice the J-hook is trying to come out there. It's trying to fall off because there's hardly anything holding it on. We're going to do it this way. So I'm going to hold that J-hook back in place. I'm going to start this back on. I screw the little nut to the bottom of the J-hook. Again, there's two lock washers here, one on top and one on bottom of the flange piece. And the screwdriver, which is pretty much, if you've ever done any kind of work on anything, you've got one of these in your house. They also do supply, most banjos, they supply with a little wrench for this sort of thing. The screwdriver just works a whole lot faster. So now, I don't want to tighten it too much, but I want to give it a certain amount of tightness there. And now you'll see when I put the banjo on so that the slot for the neck lines up with the neck, you'll see that this flange lines up with that nut. So I have 3 more to do, and then I'll come back. Okay, now I wanted to show you, I have all 4 of the little flange pieces attached. They are, one thing that I kind of messed up on the first one was that you need to leave them at least a little bit loose, because there are the little holes. You see this little hole right here that goes into the resonator screw attaches by. There is a little bolt sticking out of the bottom of the resonator. See that, the little bolt sticking out? There are 4 of those. The resonator screws will screw down onto them, but the bolts need to be lined up exactly with the holes in the little flanges, or they won't come up. So I actually had to loosen that one that I had almost tight, so I could go ahead and get the position, the final resting place, as it were, of these other flanges in the correct place, so that each flange has the little nut pointing up through it. So once I do that, I need to take them out again without disturbing the position and tighten them. Probably do one at a time just to keep myself sane, and then I can take these little bolts and screw the resonators down. Screw the flanges down to the resonator. So I'm going to do these one at a time. It's going to be boring, so I'm going to shut this guy off again. Okay, finally I have the resonator back on. I actually had it all together, and then I realized that the little hook that the strap goes onto was stuck inside, and I had to loosen it up and take it up again. In order to get this access to this thumb screw to get it on at all, I loosened the little bolt that holds the armrest on and raised it up a little. And actually, once I tightened all the other thumb screws, because I couldn't really tighten this one. I took a pair of needle nose pliers to it and torqued it up just a little bit. So the resonator is on. I would like to say the banjo is good as new. That's not true. The banjo is much better than new because it is because it's been set up. Again, the main advantage of a resonator on a banjo like this, or any banjo, is that it keeps the sound from getting absorbed into the player's stomach. Once in a while you'll see a fellow with a open back banjo playing it out like this, and that gives it the additional volume. But in this case, the main difference with a 6-string banjo, the main difference between a resonator and not having a resonator, is that it is louder and there is more sustain as a rule. Which may or may not be a good thing depending on your playing style. If you plan to do a lot of strumming, it can sound a little bit too much. If you plan to finger pick, then it's perfect. So here I have a banjo. I don't know how much I paid for it. I got it used. It had come from a person who bought it and couldn't play it at all because it had been so badly set up. I very carefully filed the slots in the neck down to bring the strings closer to the frets on this side. I used the adjustment rod to straighten the neck out so that the action would be good down here. I used the rod inside to adjust the banjo's relationship to the pot. I used the old overtone trick to set the head. Oh, and by the way, the bridge on this is, I don't know if you can really see, but the bridge on this isn't just a straight bridge. It's what they call a compensated bridge. And it didn't come on the banjo. I bought it. It was $12 or something from China. You can get them real cheap, but they're made just about as well as the ones you pay $40 for in this country. And it helps the banjo stay in tune as you play notes farther up the neck. The compensated bridge will make a difference. Again, so it's a banjo that when it first came into the country was virtually unplayable. That's one reason I got it cheap. I put a couple hours of my own time and energy into it. I used it probably 4 times on vacation as a travel guitar because I wanted to keep my fingers up. The other thing, I should mention the other thing about this particular banjo is that this is a guitar neck attached to a banjo. A professional 6-string banjo will tend to be about 2 inches longer than this. But that doesn't bother most people, and it doesn't affect the sound that much. But somebody like me, I go back and forth between banjo, 6-string banjo, and guitar. I like to have the longer neck on a banjo. But that's not critical. That won't affect most people wanting to play a 6-string banjo for most purposes. So you see the fruit basket is back on the banjo. It's held in place by these 4 little flanges, which the flanges are held in place by attaching to the J hooks, and then the flanges hold the resonator on with these thumb screws, and that's how the back works on most banjos, even inexpensive ones. I will add that I had not, before I started this program, I had not tuned this banjo in probably 2 years. So if you can tell, I would say the neck is not optimum. It's kind of a D neck. When you first pick it up, it might feel a little bit like you're playing one of the old harmony guitars, but I'm so used to going back and forth between instruments that it didn't even bother me, and that didn't occur to me to say anything about it until now. But at any rate, this is a Davison banjo. At the time it came out, was one of the least expensive 6-string banjos you could buy, was very popular with people who fell for the advertising saying that you could become any guitar player could become a master of the banjo by just buying a 6-string banjo. That said, with a little bit of work, a lot of adjustment, I was able to turn it into a musical instrument that I wouldn't really be ashamed to take anywhere. So that's all I'm going to say about this banjo. I've got several other instruments that I'm going to be working on and providing feedback about. In the meantime, I hope that you all have a lovely day, and I hope that you enjoy your music and that you enjoy your family. Bye.